Hi. Right. So let me move it up a little bit. And then, so the subject today was we were going to talk about the Yoga Sutras as opposed not just uh, we'd been dealing more with the language and grammar, but today the decision was to talk some about the Yoga Sutras, since the class was always going to be a mixture of the two. All right, let's start with an Om, and then Lauren, I don't know, I sent out at the beginning of the class, I sent out a sheet with an invocation, but we'll just do the invocation one time, call and response, so it'll be easy enough. Hi, Sheila, to follow. The sometimes it can be better to for Om it's fine, but to mute while we're chanting, because otherwise we'll all hear a lag. But so we'll start, but we'll do one Om, and then we'll do one version of the invocation with call and response. I think there's a shadow on me. Is there a way I can get that? All right, well, like that. Okay. Om Shri Ganeshaya Namaha. Om Shri Ganeshaya Namaha. Om Shri Saraswatya Namaha. Om Shri Saraswatya Namaha. Om Namo Gurave Namaha. Om Namo Gurave Namaha. Om. And Lauren, email me separately, and then I will send you some of the materials that I've sent to everyone, an alphabet chart and that chant and all that. So today we're going to talk about the Yoga Sutras, but and I just have to get something I put over there, and then but first let's chant the alphabet one time together. Again, we'll do it call and response. It's so hard to see it here. See if I can do it. How well can you guys see that? Well or not well? Is it worth doing it, or should I just look at your own? Well, Laura,
do you want us to mute or unmute for the alphabet?
Probably mute. We'll just go through it once together. So here we go. We'll start with the vowels. So Lauren, you don't have it, but I'll send it to you later, and it'll be easy enough to follow. You can see. Okay. I, u, together. I, u, a, I, o, aha. A, I, o, aha. Rit, r, rit, r, rit, r, lrit, lr, k, kh, g, gh, ng, ksha, chh, dr, drh, n, p, th, d, dh, n, p, th, d, dh, n, p, ph, b, bh, m, yaralava, sha, sha, saha, kshatrajna. Okay. I forgot that I said I was going to lead that call and response and just assumed that we were all chanting it together. I'm sorry about that. Just a second, let me get something. And so the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali is one of the 6 darshanas, or the 6 major teachings in India. Its sister system is Sankhya, which is, one could say that it's the first system of philosophy or thought that that had the notion of evolution, really. It's a different notion of evolution than the one that we think of, because it's more of an energetic, because it's not so much like specifically the evolution of, apes to human beings, for example, but the notion that there's an evolutionary process whereby things come into being and shift in the process of coming into being, and then become something else as well. So Sankhya is in its purest form, is a rigidly dualistic system, and the Yoga Sutras, in its purest, like any text, the way that you approach it, you bring everything that you have coming to it when you approach it, and and over the periods of time, so people don't know for sure when it was written, and yoga itself obviously existed, yoga practice, long before the text itself was written. But what it meant to the people, it's important to know what it meant to the people when it was written, but it's also important to understand that, as any kind of text like this, the whole point is for it to, for your understanding of it, for it to be able to last throughout time. So, it is important to understand exactly what is being said and what is meant to be being said. And at the same time, there have been liberties taken with translations of it over the years, which, which one doesn't want to totally just debunk. It's just important to know where they're varying from what the original says. I think that most people agree that it was written around, that it was put together around 400 BC, 400 AD, in the Common Era. But no one really knows for sure. So in the philosophy, the system behind it, there is Purusha and Prakriti. They're the two primal eternal powers that exist in the world, and they are both primal and eternal. And in this particular philosophy, never the twain shall meet. They never dance with each other. In Tantra, for example, they dance with each other. The relationship between the two is one of a dance, of a movement. the point of the Yoga Sutras is to identify with the seer, Purusha. And the seer, so Purusha, the word itself, Purusha, had different meanings earlier in, like in Vedic times. Purusha was more of a person, a being. And Purusha does mean being, but in the Yoga Sutras, Purusha is formless, and there is that Purusha is not really describable. Purusha is only the seer and only sees. It is the experiencer. And anything that you can describe, anything that you can explain or say, that is not Purusha. So a thought, any thought, no matter how subtle, wisdom, none of this, any kind of, the Purusha is only the quality of awareness. And awareness itself has no qualities, is formless and pure and eternal. So if you think about that like awareness itself always exists. You are always aware. Even when you're sleeping, you are still aware. What you are aware of constantly changes. So awareness itself, since you are always aware, regardless of what you are aware of, if you are aware of an orange jacket, and you can be aware of a red sweater. So obviously awareness can have no color, because you can be aware of orange and you can be aware of red, and it's still awareness. So awareness can have no form also, because you can be aware of a pillow and you can be aware of a chair. So awareness itself is the constant, and what the things rise in awareness and they retreat in awareness, but awareness itself remains pure. It is untouched by what it is aware of. It is only aware. That's Purusha. Prakriti is everything else, from a sneeze to the garbage to, the light bulb to the ocean to the whole universe. Everything that exists, including your thoughts and your emotions, everything is Prakriti. Thoughts and emotions are obviously more subtle experiences of Prakriti than a light bulb, but all of it is equally Prakriti. And that is important, that all of it, everything that happens in your mind is also part of Prakriti. So that's what's very different from sort of Western modes of thinking or philosophies in a way. Because, like, for example, Descartes, I think, therefore I am. I mean, there's more behind that makes it sound not quite so, something that you could clearly argue with. But I mean, it would be more like I am, therefore I think. Thinking is an aspect of Prakriti, is part of Prakriti. Thinking is part of the mind. It's a more subtle aspect of the mind than, than sneezing, than the body. I mean, sneezing I'm not sure how that fits into it, but it is still an activity of Prakriti. So I don't have my Sankhya chart, but the Sankhya system evolves from these. So there's these two forces. And just as a side note, there are systems that put like a Vedantic take on the Yoga Sutras. So in Vedanta, above Prakriti and Purusha, there would be like Atman, the whole, there'd be one whole. But in the actual system itself, this does not really say that there's one above it. Purusha always stays the same. Purusha never changes. But Prakriti, which is composed of the primal elements of Prakriti are the three gunas, Sattva, which is light, basically, Rajas, which is activity, and Tamas, which is stability. So these are the three elemental forces of which Prakriti is composed. But Prakriti goes through this evolutionary process from its primal, undifferentiated state where there is no thing, it's just Prakriti. And then it evolves through a series of very specific evolutionary processes until it gets to the form, what we see, what we experience. The very first evolute, and this is kind of important in terms of understanding what the Yoga Sutras is really trying to explain to you, that you are doing is called buddhi, and that's basically wisdom. So that is the highest functioning of prakriti, wisdom, where you have the, what they call the viveka, the perception, the that you can understand the essential truth that you are not anything that you think of yourself as being, because that's all a thought, but you, the I, is Purusha, the seer. So you, from all of the practices in the Yoga Sutras, are trying to get you to the place where you kind of, where your awareness de-evolves back through the stages to where you can have that viveka, that perception, that wisdom, to be able to get a glimpse of Purusha. That is still not the same thing as being being established in the awareness that you are the seer, but it is the place where you can start to where you can start to see that. Did that make sense? Do you guys understand what I said? Okay, good. It's important to know that because and then it can, because that's the point. The point of the practice is to get you to that place where you see that you are that, where you can have that perception, that wisdom. Just a second, let me just say. So much for wisdom. No, I'm just kidding. All right. The de-evolutionary aspect of it is very important in terms of understanding a big chunk of book 2, a big chunk of book 2 that is nearly impossible without understanding that how this system sort of evolves, which is so from this place of wisdom, the next thing that develops, and let me see if I have this straight, I haven't missing, is the ahamkara, which is this I-ness. So you want to, that sense of I-ness is then, you know, that where you think that you're separate and you think that you're yourself, and what the way the Yoga Sutras describe it is that you think, it's almost like thinking that the I is the thing that sees, but the I isn't the thing that sees, it's, you know, the seer. So, but it's mistaking the vehicle of perception for perception itself. Just a minute. So much fun. But so you de-evolve back through these stages of from I, and this makes sense in terms of the klesha. So for example, the first klesha, ignorance, is the ignorance of the is like a blockage. It's not a lack of knowledge so much as it is something that blocks knowledge, from the perception that you are the seer and not everything else. And then ignorance, of course, leads to a sense of I-ness, that because you don't think you're the seer, you think you're this, and then you want to protect this and you want to make this happy, so then it's desire, and of course you don't want it to suffer, so then there's aversion, and then above all else you want to keep this thing alive, so then abhinivesha, fear of death. So there's the 5 kleshas, so anytime you act out of those 5 experiences, you're sort of driving yourself deeper into being this being, and your actions accrue karma, which basically means that that you kind of you create side effects, and ultimately you want to get rid of those residual side effects. That is what karma is, and you can't get rid of all those residual. You'll just keep accruing them until you are able to act, to not be acting out of a sense of I-ness, to be acting out of that place of wisdom. All right. So do you have any questions so far? Does that's especially important in terms of understanding book 2, which is about practice, which goes into more of the specifics of practice. Any questions so far?
Can I?
Yeah.
No, you go ahead.
Okay.
Sorry if this is just because I'm new to to working with you.
Mm-hmm.
You made a, a, a you made a distinction between what you're teaching and like a tantric approach, and then what you're teaching in a Vedanta approach. Could you speak a little bit to like where your approach or this philosophy comes from, or
Okay.
or like like the way that you're interpreting it, or just
Okay.
because
So,
I'm new to in
okay.
that way.
So I am not coming from any, I'm coming from, I'm just looking at the text, at the Yoga Sutras themselves. And so again, Vedanta is one of the 6 darshanas in India. Tantra isn't, but I'm not sure what that would fall under. But I am trying to just talk about what the Yoga Sutras themselves are trying to say, separate from trying to read them in a perspective that, like, I'm trying to talk about them kind of purely, the text itself purely, what the Yoga Sutras, what the text itself, where it comes from. And I don't have an issue with anybody who wants to read it from a Vedantic perspective. But that's not where the text itself is coming from. And I myself personally, in my own life and practice, would tend to, as I think many of us would not tend towards a dualist perspective. I would tend to something more towards Vedanta, or especially from Tantra, where you view the 2 forces, reality, all of material reality, prakriti, and purusha, awareness, as interacting with each other. I can myself have a personal response against the notion that that you can feel like you're reading into the Yoga Sutras in its purest form, that there's somehow something bad about material reality, because the whole point of the Yoga Sutras is to get off that whole wheel of being born again, and to disidentify with material reality, and to identify only with being the seer. And the idea that the 2 are separate, and then material reality disappears when you identify with being awareness. It can be easy to feel like, well, that's not what I want to believe. But I think that it can be, it's kind of, I think of all of these things as like the Jain teaching story of the 6 blind men around an elephant. And they're each, like, one of them is holding onto the leg and says, oh, an elephant is like a tree. It's like a tree trunk. And the other one is like holding onto a tail and says, no, 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 you're all wrong. It's like a snake. And somebody's holding onto the ear and says, no, 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 it's like a fan or a palm leaf. And somebody else is holding onto the trunk and says it's like, oh, I don't know what, maybe that's another type of thing. But the point is that none of them are right, and all of them together aren't right. An elephant itself is something that defies any, it's not it's not just a composite of its parts, it's something more than any of that, and something that no one, all of these theories, all of these systems, they're all like blind men trying to explain what an elephant is. So together they all have something, each one has something to say, and together they show a bigger picture. But the elephant itself can't be explained. So there is something very useful and interesting in understanding that, in adopting the perspective that perception, the perceiver, awareness, is totally separate from material reality, from all of material reality. And that can, and that's what the Yoga Sutras, that's the basis of Yoga Sutras, is trying to understand the nature, the separateness or to start from a perspective that the two are separate, and you want to identify with awareness, with Purusha. And the Yoga Sutras themselves say that when you completely identify with awareness, material reality disappears, or basically becomes irrelevant. So did that answer your question?
Yeah, that's really helpful. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anyone else? Yes.
Me, teacher. I was wondering, my question's about perception and your thoughts or what they say, and even outside of the sutras, because I can't remember around the obstacles of perception for humans, because it's like what I study in my shamanic work, and I'm very curious what the Vedas say.
Okay, so the Vedas would be Vedic. This is not.
I'm sorry, I clumped it into the Vedas.
Yeah. So
Sankhya, Vedic.
Right, all that Indian stuff. Sorry. So I was going to work, and I will also work with book 1, and we'll do some chanting of it too. But there's 4 books to the Yoga Sutras. The first one is Samadhi Pada, and I'll show you cover up my book for that. I'll show some of the pictures and explain why there's Samadhi Pada. And so Samadhi is the state that you're trying to get to. It's Samadhi means something like absorption. So it's absorption in awareness, absorption in the sense of absorption in awareness with the understanding that you absorb, with awareness of being absorbed in awareness. And so it gives kind of the big overview, the big picture, like where you're going and how that happens. And then after that, it gets into practice, sadhana pada. There's my book for that. And sadhana.
Sorry, can you show that one more time?
Okay.
I was trying.
That's my book for sadhana pada.
Sadhana.
So sadhana pada starts with a description, and I'll show the picture just because of that has something to do of it gives the description of Kriya Yoga, which is Kriya comes from Kr, to do, so it's action yoga, activity yoga. So this is the yoga it's really kind of like it's active yoga practice. So most of the yoga practice involves meditation. This is what you do if you don't have the patience or time or whatever to meditate. It's like, if you can't do anything else, this is like the quick and dirty approach. Like, if you can't do anything else, do these 3 things. You do tapas, which is some sort of discipline, or it usually is it's usually translated as like austerities, but it's basically you adopt some sort of discipline that that pushes you a little bit to do something hard in a way. And tapas svadhyaya, which is self-study, which again is not like therapy. It is doing the work on your own, is what it means. It's and then Ishwari Pranadhana, which is surrender to God, or surrendered, understanding that there's a higher power and surrendering to that higher power. And then it tells you, like, why would you do that? Because then if you do it, so here in my picture, I have each of the tapas are the matches, svadhyaya is the candle holder, and Ishwari Pranadhana is the candle. And together with the 3 of them, you get the flame. And then the flame explodes. So then you have, the next sutra tells you why you would do those. You would do them because Kriya Yoga serves to, it helps you to cultivate what is necessary to maintain the, to experience and sustain the experience of samadhi, of that absorption, and it helps to lessen the kleshas. So the kleshas, that some people say that kleshas is pretty much all of what book 2 is about. The kleshas are what you're asking about, Sheila.
Okay.
Klesha is, most people translate it, it's most often translated as like roots of pain, assuming that the root of the word is klish, which is to be painful, but if the word is klesh, it's to obstruct. So the kleshas are what obstruct the view of seeing, the kleshas are what obstruct the view. The kleshas are what get in the way. They're the things that prevent you from seeing that you are that you are awareness, from understanding that you're not like, you know, the person that says you are on your driver's license, and that you're, you know, that your parents think you are and your friends think you are. You're none of those things, and that, or you're not, you don't have, it's not about like how old you are or how much money you have or what you did or didn't do, you know, or have or don't have. It's all about just being, that you are just awareness, and that all of this is just is not really truly who you are. So then it explains that then the next few sutras are, so what are the kleshas? And then it lists the kleshas. The kleshas are avidya, and I have a nesting box like a gift because they all nest in avidya. So avidya, which is ignorance, asmita, which is I-ness, raga, which is desire, dvesha, which is aversion, and abhinavesha, which is fear of death. And that's what I said before, like I said, like they really do nest in each other because they also relate to that, the evolution of prakriti. So you go from buddhi, and the next step is ahamkara, which is like what asmita has to do with. It is, ahamkara is where that sense of I-ness is. So that's why, that's the first thing is ignorance, and then there's the I-ness, and then there's the desire, and just as I explained before, because from that sense of I-ness, the ignorance makes you think that you're yourself, and then you want to protect that self and make that self happy and comfortable and give it what it wants. And the more you get involved in each of those, the more your actions spring from that place and not from the sense of awareness. Does that? Wait, Sheila, you're muted. I can't hear you.
Can you just go over the last two again? After raga is desire, and then devesha and
Dvesha, right. Dvesha is aversion.
Aversion.
Right. And abhinavesha is fear of death, or the will to live. So, and then the next sutra says, and I think what we'll do is I'll go through these sutras and then maybe we'll chant them so that you get a chance to actually hear the Sanskrit. Do you have copies of the Yoga Sutras with you, any of you, or not? Do you? You do. Wow, look at that. Oh, good. You've got my copy of the Yoga Sutras. Okay, so we'll go slowly. So then, desire, ignorance, avidya, is the field from which all the others spring. So then it has to tell you what avidya is. Avidya is, it lists 4 misperceptions of avidya. Avidya is regarding the temporary as eternal, the impure as pure, the problematic or painful as comfortable or pleasurable, and the non-self as the self. But the big one is the non-self as the self. Then it tells you what I-ness or asmita is. I-ness, so this is like a paper doll. I-ness is thinking that, that this is the seer, that the I is the seer, whereas the seer, and then raga is what follows, or what pleasure or comfort. and aversion. So that's the front of the heart, and this is the back of the heart. Aversion is what follows problems and pain. And then about abhinavesha, fear of death, they only say that the will to live, abhinavesha, is it's something that you can't escape once you're alive. Even the wise feel it. Okay. So would you guys like to do some chanting of the sutras? Okay. Again, probably, well, I'll go slow. If I go slowly, you can keep yourself, let's see how it works if I go slowly, and we do it really call and response, if we can keep it non-muted. Otherwise, we'll try muting. So tapa, tapa, svadhyayeshvara, svadhyayeshvara, pranidhanani, pranidhanani, kriya yogaha, tapa svadhyayeshvara, tapa svadhyayeshvara, pranidhanani, pranidhanani, kriya yogaha, kriya yogaha. Om. So it is tapa and svadhyaya and ishwari pranidhanani kriya yogaha. So it lists the three the three components of kriya yoga. And the next one, samadhi, samadhi, bhavanartha, bhavanartha, klesha tanu, klesha tanu, karanartascha, karanartascha, samadhi, samadhi, bhavana, bhavana, artha, artha, klesha, klesha, tanu, tanu, karana, karana, artha, artha, cha, cha, samadhi, bhavanartha, samadhi, bhavanartha, klesha tanu, klesha tanu, karanartascha, karanartascha. Om. So the breakdown of meaning for that one is, again, samadhi, obviously. Artha is like for the purpose of. So samadhi bhavana is the bhav. Bhav comes from bhu, to be. So it's, like sometimes maybe there was a time when a lot of times in yoga you would hear people talking about the bhav, the feeling. So So bhavana is, you want the, like the experience of samadhi. Bhavana is like the being, the experience of samadhi. And artha means for the purpose of. So for the purpose of the experience of samadhi. But bhavana is like more than just like having the experience like that. Bhavana is being the experience. So you want to be able to be the experience of samadhi, artha. That's one purpose. And then klesha is, of course, the kleshas. Tanu is like attenuated. It's to draw out, to lessen, to weaken. And then karana is, karana comes from to do, from kur, to do. So it's to have the effect of causing, of making tanu, karana. So, and then again, artha. So for the purpose of samadhi bhavana, to have that being samadhi, and then klesha tanu karana, to make the kleshas get thinner, weaker, so that they're not as strong, so that they don't influence everything that you do, artha, for that purpose. And cha just means and. That's why you do it, for these two things. Okay, any questions? Is that helpful to hear like how the meaning is created in the Sanskrit? Okay. Okay, so the next one is the big one, the important one. Avidya, avidya, asmita, asmita, raga, raga, dvesha, dvesha, abhinivesha, abhinivesha, klesha, klesha. So I just want to point out something here. So I broke that one down. I didn't do the whole thing because I broke it down to hear each one separately. But in terms of yourself, reading the Yoga Sutras and chanting them, the easiest thing to do, again, remember what we said before. Notice the longs. That's why we also chanted the alphabet to start out. If it has like a line over it, it's long. Ah, not ah. And it, e, oo, oo. And then all of these, a, I, o, and ow. Those are all long. So it's not, so it's klesha. The a gets like more, gets a little bit more, gets more, is longer. So it's, and avidya, so they're all strung together, but avidya is avidya. Another thing that makes a sound long is when there are two consonants. A vowel is long when there are two consonants that follow it. That's so that's avid. It gets the I. It's not e. It's still I, but it gets a little bit. It still gets lengthened somewhat because it's followed by avidya, avid, by the d and the ya. But the first thing to notice, just notice the longs and the shorts. So in the way that it's put together, it's avidya smita, because the two ahs join together. So avidya smita, avidya smita, raga, raga. So you can see again the the long and the short Dvesha, dvesha, binivesha. So because dvesha and binivesha get joined together. And it's just, dvesha itself, the word, doesn't have a long at the end of it. But the short dvesha plus the short of a binivesha join together and become one long So it's dvesha, binivesha, dvesha, binivesha. Avidya does have a long on the end of it, so it's avidya. And asmita doesn't have a long that starts it, but although it would get a little bit lengthened anyhow because it's the and the s, the s and the ma together, sma. Is that clear? Okay. So avidya, avidya, smita. Together. Avidya, smita, raga, raga, dvesha, binivesha, dvesha, binivesha, klesha, klesha. So this is a certain kind of sutra. There's I think is there three types of sutra for, but this is like a definitional sutra, or it's a sutra that lists a series. Like it just lists that what avidya, avidya, asmita, raga, devesha, and abhidavesha. These are the kleshas. It doesn't have the verb in it. There's not very many verbs. So that's the other thing about the sutra form. The sutra form is kind of like a mashup of like haiku, a mnemonic device, and a PowerPoint presentation without the notes. So it's designed like a PowerPoint presentation, only to give you like the bare bones of what you need to understand something. And the understanding behind that is that you would learn this from a teacher who would give you the rest of the notes from the PowerPoint after the PowerPoint presentation. And it's designed to be a mnemonic device too. So the advantage of the sutra form is that it's, relatively easily memorized, and that then also because it's so compact, the Yoga Sutras themselves come down from us over the period of time relatively unscathed in terms of, and relatively clear. There's only a few, I can only think of two issues, like where there's sort of, or maybe, there might be more, but where there's some disagreement about like, is there this sutra, how many sutras are there? Is this part of the sutra? Is this part of the commentary? But because it's so compact, and it makes it easy for it to come down through the centuries without being changed a lot.
A question on pronunciation.
Mm-hmm.
When you're saying Devesha, Binivesha,
Mm-hmm.
are you saying that mashed up A, are you pronouncing it twice? Like, is there a distinction there as you say the combined word, or are you just holding it longer?
To actually chant the sutra as it is, it's just Dvesha, Binivesha. It's not Dvesha, Abhinivesha. It's Dvesha, Binivesha.
Okay, thank you.
But many, like Sri Brahmananda Saraswati, when he chants it, I mean, sometimes he chants it if you listen to him, the tapes or the videotapes of him chanting it, often he'll chant the whole sutra first, and then he'll chant it again word by word, especially with an important one like this one. And sometimes he won't start with them all together. Sometimes he'll start with them each separately, because it's so important that you understand each one separately. The Sanskrit form itself, when you put them together, the words come together. But the important thing is to know what it's saying here. So it's totally okay to chant it with each one separately. Like if you're chanting it with your students or with other people or something like that, it's okay to separate them out and chant them. I give you permission. Okay, any other questions? All right. So with any time that there's there's only one example I can think of in the Yoga Sutras where this doesn't happen, but all except for that one time, if you get a sutra that is the sort of overarching definitional sutra like that, like this one that lists what the kleshas are, it will then be followed by specific definitional sutras that define each of those kleshas, which is what the next one that it says tells you something about them, which is avidya, avidya, kshetram, kshetram, uttaresham, uttaresham, prasupta, prasupta tanu. Tanu doesn't get lengthened. Tanu vichino dharanam. Tanu vichino dharanam. Avidya kshetram. Avidya kshetram. Uttaresham. Uttaresham. Prasupta tanu. Prasupta tanu. Vichino dharanam. Vichino dharanam. Om. And so actually when I chant them, most of the time I actually don't sing them, as you can tell, because I change the tune pretty much every time that I sing them. Most of the time I just chant them. So it would be avidya kshetram uttaresham prasupta tanu vichino dharanam. And sometimes it's since there is no one, there's no one tune that you need to chant something like a sutra to. If it's easy for you to do it to a tune, that's fine. It's also fine just to chant them without. Avidya is, again, avidya, it is ignorance. Kshetram is the field. I think it's one of the first words in the Gita, about the field of battle, but they're also referring to, I think that even in it's a certain sort of reference to the battle of life, which involves ignorance. Uttaresham is of the others, and then the next word describes, so of the others refers to the other kleshas. Avidya kshetram, avidya is left out. There's not very many verbs in the Yoga Sutras because of the sutra form. So avidya is the field of the others, from which the others spring. And then the next few words are that describe regardless of what their state is. Prasupta means dormant, like supta baddha konasana, or supta, supta means reclining or sleeping, supta, prasupta. Tanu, again, is attenuated, like in the earlier one, weakened or feebled. Vichina is intercepted. It even sort of sounds like that, vichina, and it occurs, it's like chopped up. Vichina is chopped up. Or scattered, it can also mean. And udaranam is busy, activated, like going full force. So avidya is the field from which the other ones spring, regardless of their state, whether they are sleeping, whether they're weak, whether they're all chopped up, so appear to be all scattered and spread out, or whether they're fully activated, going full force. Prasupta would be like a seed, not really, really totally, appears to be not present, like dormant, but it is there still. Okay, any questions? Okay. So, oh my goodness, it's almost noon. I had thought to start with book 1, but we ended up starting with book 2. I think some of the things that they sometimes you read, they say book one is much more difficult than book two, and then book two is for beginners. That isn't really my experience of them, but I would say this: book one, it does give you the big picture. And book one, I think book one is beautiful. It really talks about, like, it gives you the whole overview of the experience of samadhi. And sometimes people say if you understand book one, then you don't need anything else, but it's like they each tell you something. Book two is about practice in the sense that it explains the underpinnings of practice, and then it also starts with the 8 limbs. But I'm in the time that we have left, rather than chant more, I'm going to give you more of an overview of book two, and we can continue from that. Because getting the overview is really helpful, I think, especially with book two. So then it describes each of the 5 kleshas. It tells you what they are. And I already went through that. When we get, after it tells you about Abhinavesha, we get to the beginning of the sutras that are almost impossible to understand unless you know something about Samkhya, which is, it says the way that it translates is the subtle, meaning the subtle ones, meaning the subtle kleshas, are removed by reverse evolution. Does anybody just automatically understand what that means? It's like, I remember when I got to this, I was like, what? So the subtle, so the kleshas, by the subtle form of the kleshas, they mean like sort of in a general sense. When we're thinking about the kleshas in the most sort of abstract way, the way that we get rid of them, the basic understanding of getting rid of these kleshas are, we want to move ourselves back from the experience of material reality as things to the experience of reality as undifferentiated prakriti. We want to, the kleshas also exist in prakriti. So in order to get rid of them, because we have to get rid of them, we are not going to be able to until we get rid of ignorance, we cannot see that we are awareness. So the kleshas are what prevent us from being able to understand that we are awareness. So it is crucial that we get rid of the kleshas. That's why much of book 2 is about the kleshas. How do we get rid of these obstructions to awareness? So this says, basically, what you want to do is you want to move your experience of reality back from this place where you experience things as things to a place where you experience reality in its undifferentiated prakriti, where you can experience reality in as close as possible to its undifferentiated form. When that's your experience, that's how to get rid of the kleshas. You have to move your perception back in that way. So then the next one says, so that's the general idea. When it says like the subtle obstructions, they're talking about the subtle understanding in a general sense. This is what we want to do with the kleshas. But then the next sutra says the fluctuations of the kleshas are removed via meditation. So this is more like, so that's the general idea. Specifically, when the kleshas show up in reality, the way we get rid of, when you actually find yourself specifically dealing with the active, the fluctuations of the kleshas, the way you remove them is through meditation, dhyana. So when you actually find yourself face to face with ignorance or desire or aversion, the way to remove them, the way to lessen them or remove them, the way to deal with them is dhyana, meditation. Then there are a series of sutras that tell you more about the kleshas. It tells you that the kleshas continue over lifetimes and that you accrue karma from any action that springs from the kleshas, accrues karma, and that this karma lasts over lifetime, that this karma has an effect on the future lifetimes, that whether the karma is good or bad. See, the thing is that if an action springs out of one of the kleshas, if you're acting out of ignorance, you will accrue good karma if it's a good action, which will have an impact on the lifetimes that you experience. But basically, from the perspective of the Yoga Sutras, you're still accruing karma, and you want to stop accruing karma. You want to like lessen the karmic bank account. And so then it says, so then for one of discriminating wisdom, everything is only painful, the good and the bad, regardless, or problematic. And it gives you the reasons why. More to be said about this one later, but I just want to try to move through all of them. Then, so that's kind of like the first noble truth of Buddhism, that life is suffering, that is, you know, but there's a way out, is what the next one says. And the cause of then you want to avoid the pain. The way to avoid the pain, the cause of this is ignorance, and that the ignorance is the cause of that pain is the conjoining of the seer and the seen, the apparent samyoga, thinking the two are joined when they're not joined. And then it goes into a description of material reality, of the nature of the seen, Prakriti, and then it goes into a description of the nature of the seer, and the nature of the real relationship between the two, and that ignorance exists so that the seer can know itself. But once the ignorance is removed, then the conjunction, the appearing, the sense that the two are one is removed, and then that's where then the pain is removed, and that's the whole point. And then the way to eliminate ignorance is through viveka khyati, the uninterrupted discriminating discernment. And viveka is, again, the quality that is inherent in buddhi, the first evolute of material reality. So you want to get back to that first place where you have the discrimination, to perceive that material reality is different from the seer, and from that place you can begin to identify with being the seer, and not with being even a wise aspect of the seen. And then it tells you that the way to develop the viveka khyati, the way to get rid of the impurities and develop the viveka khyati, is through the 8 limbs. So the 8 limbs are like the ultimate cleaning supplies, or they contain the ultimate cleaning supplies. The 8 limbs both are the practice, and they're not really the practice, in the sense that the whole point is to develop this perception. And the 8 limbs are designed as tools to help bring you to that perception. And then so the first half of book 2 is giving you the underpinnings, the reasoning why. And then the second half is dealing with with the 8 limbs in the first part. And we can talk more about that later, next week. Any questions before we end?
Could you just pronounce the 8 limbs? Like, yeah, could you pronounce each one of them?
Sure. Okay. I'll get to that sutra. Okay, so, okay, yama, niyama, pranayama, and it's pranayama. There's long and also, just if you're noticing correctly, it's not pranayama, it's pran. You know, there's a na, the na with the tongue rolled back. It's a cerebral na. Pranayama. Pratyahara. So those are, prat is again lengthened because it's followed by the ta and the ya. Pratyahara. They're all long, essentially. And dharana. And again, there's a cerebral na there, so it's dharana. Dhyana. Samadhi. And that is it, right? Yama, niyama, I forgot asana. How about that? It's the one that sorry. Yama, niyama, asana, pranayama, pratyahara, dharana, dhyana, and samadhi. So we do it together. Yama, niyama, asana, pranayama,
Yama,
pratyahara,
Tyahara,
dharana,
Dharana,
dhyana, dhyana, samadhi,
Samadhi.
samadhi. Those are the 8 limbs. And book 2 goes up to pratyahara, and then dharana, dhyana, and samadhi begin book 3.
Can you just tell me what Viveka Katir means? What does Katir mean? Right seeing? Right perception?
Kyatir. And it's
Yeah.
kyati is the word. It's Viveka Kyati. It becomes Viveka Kyatir because the Kyati meets the next word. The sarga change makes it become Viveka Kyati. What's the next word in it? Aviplava. So Viveka is discriminating wisdom. And Kyati is a way of being or seeing. It's a way of it, yeah. So a Viveka Kyati is a way of seeing, being, through, that is characterized by Viveka.
Okay, discriminating wisdom.
Right. Viveka is the quality that you want to build. And it's the quality that's associated with sattva, with light, and with buddhi. So all those 3 words, sattva, viveka, buddhi, anytime you see those in the Yoga Sutras, that's referring to the highest experience of Prakriti. They're a little bit like, they're synonymous with each other in a way. And the quality of having developed that viveka is the kyati. That's the,
okay.
So the viveka is that clear enough?
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, so we'll finish with an Om, but next week shall we continuing on with book 2? How does that sound? And then we'll go backwards to book 1. Book 1, there's a funny way in which book 1 does sort of make more sense after you understand some of the stuff in book 2. But either way is good. Okay, good. And if anybody else, if you have any requests, send them to me, or questions. All right. Let's do a final Om and sit for a second, and then so this was most of the time when I teach about the Yoga Sutras, it's in the context of also having like the paintings up, which can make it, which, you know, gives there's a certain sort of energy from the paintings themselves, and the visuals that the paintings present of the meanings is also, I think, certainly for me, the experience of working with the Yoga Sutras via painting them. I mean, as I've said, I learned, like, I didn't really like the Yoga Sutras when I started. When I started painting them, I sort of realized that I needed to work with them, because I realized that they weren't, I had always thought of them as kind of like the 10 Commandments on steroids. And I realized that they weren't that. I had like this sort of moment of awareness where I realized that they weren't that, and that they were a mind training manual, which they are, but they're more than that as well. And I thought, oh, you know, I have to work with them because like they have the key. But how was I going to keep myself doing it? Because, you know, even though I was studying Sanskrit, and I had been studying Sanskrit for a while, I knew that, like, just left to myself, I would like open up the book and I'd be really good for maybe a week, maybe 2, but within 3 weeks, that book would be sitting by my bed, you know, unopened. So how was I going to make myself actually stick to the project of working with the Yoga Sutras? I had recently just finished, I got my studio here in San Francisco after having had a studio for years in New York. When we moved first year, I didn't, by talking to a father of a friend of Jesse's who was here for a play date. He was a lot younger then. About, you know, my plan to start painting using Sanskrit when I had a studio again, and that I was about to start studying the Shiva Mahimna Stotram, which I knew nothing about other than that. Like I had decided, I'd asked Dr. Sharma to work with me on the Shiva Mahimna Stotram, and he'd agreed. And I had read in the little booklet with the Shiva Mahimna Stotram, the last of the verses say that just to have the Shiva Mahimna Stotram in your house, not even to open it or look at it or read it or chant it, just to have the thing in your house is said to please Shiva so enormously that all these blessings come on you. So I was like, man, and then I kind of like, I'm painting using Sanskrit. And he was like, oh, that sounds really interesting. My wife has this large studio. Let me see if she'd share it with you. So then I actually had to paint the Shiva Mahimna Stotram, which like so totally kicked my butt, because also I had only been studying Sanskrit for like a year or so, and it's really hard to like write, you know, it was really hard. But I had just finished it. And I thought, so I had this flash of awareness where I think I need to work with the Yoga Sutras. I think, so how can I make myself stick to it? I thought, I know, I'll paint them. And I hear this voice in my head go, are you nuts? Like, you remember this was hard, right? And you know, there's like 200 sutras. What are you thinking? It's like, no, I'll just commit to painting book 1. It'll be fine. It'll be. So I did know that it was potentially really stupid, but it was the only way I could think of to get myself to stick to the project. And there was a point, so then that was in the spring of 2011. I spent most of the summer figuring out how I was going to do it. And I am getting here to a question to you guys, and then in the fall when I started painting, like, I mean, I had big plans. I did the first one, Atta Yoga Anushasanam, and I painted, you know, a glass of spilled milk, even though that takes some, artistic license with the, you know, with the actual meaning, but we'll talk about that later. And I had big plans for the next one, Yogash Chitta Vritti Nirodha. Like, that's like the big, like, what is yoga? Yoga is it's usually translated as the stilling of the mind, but I meant to talk some about chitta, about what that actually is, because that's important too in terms of understanding the Yoga Sutras. And I'll try to remember to talk about that next time. But so I was gonna show what a good paint. I was gonna sand this down, and I was gonna like really make it like I was gonna show what a good painter I was. And I'd sanded it down to do all this work I was gonna do, and I realized all it needed was this gold dot in the center. And actually, and then it was perfect. That actually really depressed me and made me feel really anxious. It's like the whole process of working on book 1 was the process of sort of surrendering to the Yoga Sutras as they kind of told me what to do. And in that process, like, the Yoga Sutras taught me, but that process isn't, so there's this process of learning to surrender and learning to listen, and then sometimes also not, sometimes having to do something that seemed really difficult. But the point is that the process of engaging with the sutras in that way, through painting them, there was an experience of the Yoga Sutras that it was more like I thought I was showing up to work with the Yoga Sutras, but it was more them than working on me and them teaching me. And that's something too that comes through the paintings. But I also learned things in the process. Like when I got to book 2, so then I was in love with the Yoga Sutras at the end of book 1. And I couldn't wait to get going with book 2, but I actually wrote the book, which hadn't been my original intention, while I did the first few sutras about the kleshas. And then finally I was done and I was ready to get going. And then there's all this Samkhya stuff. And I'm like, I don't even know if I believe this stuff or like this stuff, or like, why am I doing this? But the paintings kept showing me things about the sutras that that were beyond my rational mind or my understanding or the logic or anything like that. This becomes particularly true with some of the later sutras, and I'll go into it more next time. But process of, but part of why I'm telling you that story too is that as it approached, doing the class today about the Yoga Sutras, this was, I really, this is sort of the first time that I set out to like just sort of talk about the Yoga Sutras, separate from, in some ways, like really talking about the paintings and the process that I went through working with the Yoga Sutras, which which that process and what I learned through the process of working on each of the sutras, sometimes especially the ones that I went into thinking I don't like this, that's what I most often have had to talk about. So I wanted also to get some feedback from you guys as to whether how we talked about it today was helpful or useful, because this is sort of the first time that I talked about the sutras not starting from the point of talking about my process working on the Yoga Sutras, which I'm also totally comfortable talking about if you'd like to hear more about that next time. So does anybody have any feedback for was this helpful today? Was this, what is most interesting to you? How would you most like to move forward as we continue to look at the Yoga Sutras?
Can I say one thing and then leave because I have to go?
Yeah.
I just love chanting them. So as long as we get to chant them, I'm happy.
Okay, good.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Bye, Sheila.
Thank you, Melissa. Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else?
Yeah, I think it's really helpful to chant them and to learn the breakdown of the words, because I feel one of the best things I'm getting out of this is just words that maybe I've been mispronouncing or I've heard completely said differently. Like I'm just getting more familiar with the sounds of Sanskrit, and I really appreciate that.
Good. Okay.
Yeah, same for me here. And I have the books, and so I'm looking at the paintings and following along. I think one thing is I got a little lost at some points when we weren't saying exactly what verse we were on, even with the paintings.
Oh, okay.
So I think that would be helpful next time,
Okay.
just to keep a little bit better track.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah, and I agree with everyone with the chanting is super helpful for me. I have your books, but I left them in San Francisco, so I don't have them with me. And it's hard when you kind of show them onto the screen. I don't really see them, and it's hard for me to connect with that. So it's the chanting and the pronunciation. That part is more helpful for me, at least, not having the book.
I can also, next time, this is what I should do. I can have a screenshot as well of the picture. So that is actually what I should do, because that would be easier for me too, because that's completely possible. I can just, because I have the file on my computer, so I'll just set up a screenshot in advance so that I can go through it.
Yeah, I think having that like a way to orient us to what we're focusing on for the day. Like I finally got it. I was like, oh, we're doing the kleshas, and like this is where it all is. When we first launched into talking about Samkhya, I was a little bit lost and like ungrounded, and so that like having some sort of orientation to how we are approaching the material could be helpful, and if that could come through a screenshot or whatever would be really helpful for me, at least.
Okay. All right. Good. Lauren, do you have any, how was that for you? I can't hear you.
I haven't done any other workshops with you, so I don't have anything to compare to with working with the paintings, although I'm familiar with your paintings somewhat. But I like the chanting. I like refining the pronunciation.
Okay, good. We'll spend time focusing on. We'll definitely emphasize that next time. Good. And do you have a preference of continuing to work through book 2, or would you like to go back and start with book 1? Does anybody have what?
Sorry, I didn't know if you were asking just me or you were asking everyone.
Everyone.
I don't have a preference.
Doesn't matter. Whatever you feel called to share. I'm good.
Okay, sounds good. I'll figure that out. All right, so thank you very much, and see you guys next week.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Glad.